Ready, sir.
All right, let's go.
Father, we thank you, Lord, for our time together with you. We thank you, Lord, that we get to discuss your word and to study it. And I pray, Lord, as always, Holy Spirit, come in and teach this class. We're the students and you are the teacher. Help us this evening, Lord, as we go into your word. Father, we be careful to give the Father praise and glory and honor. Amen.
Amen. Okay, we'll jump right into the Mideast tonight. And, boy, I tell you, Israel's between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, they are.
It's a terrible situation for them. I don't know. If I'd been in their shoes, I don't think I would have done the ceasefire. I wouldn't have stopped. I just kept going and let chips fall where they want. Of course, the Israeli government's getting pressure from the inside in that their people, hi, buddy. Their people were pressing to get the hostages out, the families, that had hostages. And that's that's a terrible thing to say. We're going to keep fighting and we're not worrying about the hostages right now. But that's what they should have done. What they've created now is they've got the ceasefire, and most of the world is pressuring them to keep the ceasefire.
Right.
And the thing of it is, Hamas has not. Hamas has broken the ceasefire multiple times. Did again this afternoon. They killed some people in Jerusalem. Hamas took credit for it. So, yeah, those are our people. And so, anyhow, I don't know where it's going to come out. Israel could start bombing again tomorrow morning, or what time would it be our time? Let's see, 7
hours ahead.
Yeah. Any time right now. They could relight the fires. So we'll see what happens. It's some of the stories that's coming out on the hostages has been released really bad. I guess some of the young kids to mark them. Did you hear on that one? They marked some of the kids so they could keep track of them. You know how they marked them? Stuck their legs up against a hot motorcycle muffler and branded their calves. That's kind of people you're dealing with. And I saw something, of course, the UN, there's UN such a big dog about, we've got our people in there and they're working with them. Well, come to find out, one of the UNRWA, which is the UN relief agency, one of the people that works for them that is paid by the UN, he was keeping some of the hostages in his house locked in the attic. And he's a UN worker, relief worker. And he's locked. He was, so the thing of it is, it's just, you can say the war's kind of on hold, but it just sort of. The thing of it is, Israel had Gaza under complete siege. They had them cut off from the world. And now, I read an article today about the Israeli soldiers are staying in their area that they agreed to stay in, and they're watching the Hamas terrorists restock and move stuff around and everything. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I know Israel has created themselves an absolute terrible situation to be in, and don't know how they're going to get out of it. Things that's been interesting, of course, we haven't been together for 2 weeks. The tunnel system is just unbelievable. I mean, I did quite a bit of watching on some of that. The money that had to be spent to build those tunnels will blow you away. Those things are all concrete reinforced. Right. They had bathrooms. They had automatic oxygen system. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And it's just mind-blowing. Some of the other things that you may not have caught that's important. Israel and Jordan, Jordan's pretty much stayed out of this. But now that this ceasefire thing started, they're telling Israel, well, if you go back and start bombing again, we're probably going to not honor our energy and water agreements that we have. See, they supply energy and water. They have between the two countries. That's a big deal. The Hezbollah has been working the borders of Israel, the northern borders, during the ceasefire. Jordan supposedly had a army exercise going on right on the border. Basically what it was, they were shooting and banging and everything just to keep the Israelis on edge that live on the border. So it's a psychological type thing. Did you catch what happened when they posted bin Laden's letter manifesto on TikTok? Oh, you guys haven't picked up on that?
Yeah. I saw that.
Man, the millennials here in the United States have jumped on this big time. And here's their comments. We now understand the war in Israel. And we understand why Hamas is doing what they're doing. Yeah. Bin Laden's letter. It went viral on TikTok, just tremendous, around the world, but especially here in the United States. And these idiot kids that we've raised is just unbelievable. But it's because they've been educated at the colleges. I mean, and it's not, of course, it's not all of them. I mean, you know, I say that, and I've got grandkids that are millennials. But the college-educated, from especially the liberal universities, they've jumped on this thing with both feet, and just, man, now they understand. The light went on. They know now why Israel's at fault and why Hamas and the Muslims are doing what they're doing. And they'll tell you they're justified in doing it. So it's really sad. Bart?
Your comment on the water and the electric that you was talking about being cut down, you think there's somebody else behind that that's helping urge that?
It's hard to say. I mean, there's so much underhanded stuff going on that
That's
anything's possible.
right.
That's when you look at this, you've got to think that. Some countries now, there are some positive things going on. Some countries are now banning TikTok totally out of the country. They tried to do that here and didn't get done. It should have been. Did you pick up that? Here's the thing. Over 2,000 years ago, in a little town with the Hebrew name of Bethlehem, there was a man born, and the world's getting ready to celebrate that.
Mm-hmm.
But to not infuriate the Muslims, the city of Bethlehem has taken down all Christmas decorations. Yeah. You know, thought you'd enjoy that. The other thing, I'd say there's some good things going on. There's quite a few of the EU countries that are banning Hamas support agent groups, people that make donations, support Hamas. They're shutting them down, making them illegal. There's been several countries that's passed the law. EU seems to be waking up to their Muslim population is a problem. In Sweden, Wilder, he got elected. He's ultra conservative, and the reason being, in Sweden, they're having a lot of problems with their Muslims,
Right.
and the people are getting fed up with it. So they elected Wilder. Wilder's going to take the bull by the horns. He came out and he just caught all kinds of condemnation around the world. He said Jordan is Palestine. He said, not Israel isn't Palestine, Jordan is Palestine. I mean, he was just really laying it on pretty thick. The other big conservative win that we had this last week was in Argentina. And that guy is like Trump, kind of a wild type. And but anyhow, you're starting to see, especially in Europe, see it in Argentina, that the general populace may be waking up and saying enough's enough. So we'll see what comes out of that. Of course, our president is still stuck on his two-state solution, and I'll repeat what I told you all a couple weeks ago. how can you have a two-state solution when one of the parties, all they want and all they will accept is the elimination of the other one? So how do you have a two-state solution when one party wants the other party dead and intends to do it? You know, it's just impossible, and it's crazy to consider. We'll jump up to the EU. They're trying to force peace on Ukraine, and guess what the carrot they're offering? It dawned on me. I haven't read this, but I picked up on it. This last week, been about 8 or 10 days ago, there was the NATO, NATO come out and said, we intend to let Ukraine join NATO. All right, it's a pretty big statement. Well, this goes on for a couple of days, and I keep watching some of this. And then all of a sudden, there's been 3 different countries, NATO countries, or European countries, that have said, well, yeah, we intend to bring Ukraine into NATO, but it can't be done until there's peace. So what they're saying, if you read between the lines, Ukraine agreed to peace deal, and then they'll be set up to be brought into NATO. That's how it's going to come about. I really believe that.
It's counterproductive, isn't it?
Yeah. But they've got here's the thing. Ukraine's got a real long winter coming ahead. The reason being, Russia's been stockpiling missiles and munitions all over the Crimea area and up along the Dnipro River on the border, on the war border. Ukraine, on the other hand, they can't stockpile anything because nobody's shipping them anything. Right. I read today that they've only gotten 30% of the weapons they were promised. Yeah, from NATO. NATO promised them, the countries promised them so much, they've only received 30% of it. So they got a long winter coming ahead. The West is balking on shipping what they promised to ship. That's what it amounts to. And if you get online and let's say you read Poland news, or you read France news, France 24 is a really good one, or you read Czechoslovakia, or any of I don't read every one of them every day, but I bounce around on them. I'll read Hungary maybe today, maybe tomorrow I'll go and look at Poland newspapers, et cetera, and things like keep bouncing around. Well, it's a common thread between all of them now that they're reluctant to be shipping stuff to Ukraine. They don't want to spend any more money. So that's what's happening. That's the reason the stuff's not being shipped. So it's I did notice, and I think this is true, Zelensky, the president, of course, of Ukraine, he went out and bought 2 yachts this last week. Yeah, got 2 yachts. And I forget, and I think it was to the tune of $245 million or something like that. 75. And then the other thing was, and I can't remember the names. I should have written.
Lucky Me and My Legacy.
That's right, boy. Very good, Heather. That's great.
The last 2 days, I've just been on top crap.
One of them was called Lucky Me, and the other one was called My Destiny, and My Legacy. And so that's some of your tax money at work. Okay. Let's jump to, anybody got any questions so far on anything we covered?
He does stuff like this, and it really lowers the sympathetic cause type mentality that the world may or may not have at this point.
Yeah. Because
of the fact that, that's not chump change. That come out of people's pockets. People that were forced to participate whether they wanted to or not.
Yeah.
They weren't asked.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of things that were imposed on us today. Whether you want to or not, you are going to participate.
Yeah.
And that really lowered the status of need in his country at that point.
Yeah, it's not a good situation for Ukraine. Okay, let's jump to China. It's interesting to note BRICS is no longer just an economic group. They had their and see BRICS has always just been an economic. They don't do anything other than get together and talk business. The 5 countries. Except last week when they met, they came out with a joint statement against Israel in the war. So now the BRICS has become a political entity,
Right.
besides just economic. So that's an important turning point, really is. It sets the stage for the future. Did you read where China had a biolab in California
I saw that.
and the CDC refused to investigate it? And they had pathogens. They had Ebola. They had a list of bad things. The only way they finally got somebody to look at it was there was a California worker. It was a lady. She was had something to do with the health department, and she had driven by this old warehouse and she noticed that there was water being discharged. Supposedly that's some rule. She knew there was some rule, so she'd stopped and checked in on it. The Chinese biolab in California with deadly pathogens.
Wasn't there something else though that was discovered? I want to say maybe like a year, not long after the outbreak of COVID. That was also here in the.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comment was there was another one a couple of years ago during the COVID break. So, but there again, the big thing was here, they couldn't even get they called the CDC and say, hey, this thing's got some pathogens and stuff in it. They refused to go look at it. Stop and think about that.
Kind of figure out who's pulling it,
Yep.
writing the checks.
Here is something that's interesting. Heather and I come across. China is harvesting genomes and DNA. Of course, remember back, we talked about this maybe a year ago where this company was buying used diabetic test strips. And it was in Washington, I think. And come find out it was owned by China and all the information was going to China. China has been building they're trying to build a DNA library on everybody in the world. Meaning, I put it this way, they're trying to build a DNA library on every ethnic group in the world. Now, the reason being, if you take the DNA and then you tie it to gene splicing, using genes, you can create, theoretically, you can create a pathogen that will only attack a certain ethnic group.
Right.
Right? So to do that, you've got to have the DNA and the genomes of those people. You got to have a catalog. Well, what they've been doing here, if you're a lady that's pregnant, and I think they've been doing this for a while, if you want to be tested to see if your baby has Down syndrome or something, okay, that's what they're doing. Except the data goes to China. You get tested, and the DNA and the genome ends up going to China, building their database. That's about all I had on China. There's not much militarily going on except the same stuff. It hasn't escalated any. They have just been keep doing their drills. They're still moving troops and armament to the border with Taiwan over on the ocean. You know, the ocean goes, you got the Strait of Taiwan
Right.
between Taiwan and mainland China, and they're massing things on the mainland China side. That's still going on. Okay, in the USA, we'll finish out here in a couple minutes. It was interesting to note that our good president joined Obama in leaving God out of the Thanksgiving message. The only 2 presidents to ever do that since Thanksgiving's been a thing. They did not mention God in Thanksgiving message at all. No thanks there. In Wisconsin, Christmas trees are including one satanic Christmas tree and one transgender Christmas tree to fulfill the law. 261 churches in Georgia that used to be Methodist are no longer Methodist churches. Just in the state of Georgia, 261. And it's all over. We talked about this over a year ago when the main Methodist organization decided to embrace the LBGT thing totally. In fact, I don't know where it happened or not, but I know at that time there was talk about the worldwide conference, which is in Europe, was going to disown the United States conference. I don't know if that happened or not. A lot of people don't understand the way the Methodists work. The Methodist Church organization owns that church. I can remember when Everton Methodist Church decided to leave Methodist. It's been a long time ago. But some of you may have known Jim Lake. He used to have the furniture store and used to own Pavies. Jim was a great guy, a very good friend of mine. We went to church together for a long time down at Everton Community Church. Anyhow, Jim was kind of like the president of the board or something down there. There wasn't too many people in the church at that time. I was not going to the church at that time. I was in Illinois. They decided to leave the Methodist Church. They were tired of being dictated to by the Methodists. So they met, I think, in Indianapolis, and the Methodist group up there dangled over their head, well, you don't own that church. We own that church. And so Jim says, okay, how much you want for it? Give me a price. That day alone, Jim Lake bought that church. And that's how that's how I got to know how the Methodist organization operates. They own the church. They own the building. So that's how they try to maintain some control. The other things going on in here that I picked up on, Muslims in the United States. Here's these Muslim, the mosque. They're preaching everything out of the Quran, anti-Israel and anti-everybody but Muslim. Now the big thing is they're spouting that there must be Muslims in every household in the United States. The reason being, it's called the ummah, which in Arabic means community, depends on this. And that's out of the Quran. That all homes have to be Muslim in it, in order for the community to operate. And they're preaching this stuff. Not sure what's going on here. I'll talk just briefly about it because I understand the concept. In I think it was either 2017 or 2019, Putin was meeting with a group of students that were high-end students, top of their class in AI work and new technology and stuff. He made a comment to him. He says, I will tell you today that whoever gets to the point of creating the master AI, if you want to call it or whatever, will rule the world. Well, that's maybe coming to fruition.
Right.
Altman, I don't know if you picked up on it or not. Altman was fired. He's the one that's on the super AI group. Microsoft was going to hire him, but Altman was fired by the board of directors. There's 700 and some people that work in that. What's the name of that company, Tom? Do you remember? I should have wrote it down. They're the ones that do the chat GPT and all this stuff.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I can't think of the name. Anyhow,
Fusion.
something like that. anyhow, it doesn't matter. Here's the thing. They fired him. Altman is undisputedly probably the master on AI. All right? He's the brilliant one. They fired him. Well, about 700 of the 770 employees signed a letter to the board of directors saying, if you don't hire him back, we're leaving. Almost the whole company was going to leave. Well, lo and behold, they hire him back next day. The storyline that's coming out of this is they are on the verge of creating an AI that can supersede a human.
Right.
All right? Now, you got to stop and think about this. Here's what Putin meant when he was talking. I'm not smart enough to explain all this to you, except it's kind of basic concept. If you have an artificial intelligence that is smarter and quicker than a human, all right, once you develop that, no one else can create one that will be better than yours because yours is getting smarter all the time.
Right.
It is once it's kind of like you get in a race and you got a leader out here and he's getting strong. He's already in the lead and he's getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. There is no way to catch him. That's what's going to happen with this AI.
Isn't that what they're referring to as AIG?
Yes, it is. You're right. It is AIG. And that's the basic concept. The word on the street is, and it's not been verified or anything, is that they may be there right now. And that's what this guy, Altman, was quitting because he wanted it stopped. He wanted them to quit and not go any further. And they're not going to quit. They're going to keep pushing it. Anyhow, it's going to be interesting to watch what comes out of that. One thing of good news I'll end on. We talked about, I was talking about how Planned Parenthood was talking about how many abortions they had already done, even with Roe Wade thing. The other thing that's interesting, according to the article I read the day before yesterday, there's been 30,000 more births since Roe Wade than there would have been without it.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yes.
So there is an impact, a positive impact. There are more kids being born. So any questions on anything? I know I kind of rambled a little bit tonight. I apologize for that.
I have a question. What do you know about, I believe it's Michigan, that they're trying to enforce the Second Amendment and taking their guns and the militia?
Yeah. The question is, the Second Amendment in Michigan, there is a township that is creating what they're calling a Second Amendment sanctuary township. Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, and they're establishing their own militia.
They're establishing their own militia. I read on it a little bit, not a lot. It appears that they are just following law. And just like you could create a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants, which was done, these guys are creating a sanctuary township for Second Amendment people.
And if I'm understanding it right, I don't know all about that stuff with militia, but from my understanding, it is when they're a part of the militia, if they get this pushed through and they start pulling guns, if you're a part of this militia, you have that right to bear your arms,
Right.
because you are a part of that militia
Right.
to protect. Right?
Yeah, the militia laws, they vary by state. And my knowledge, they vary by state. And anyhow, it goes back to the Second Amendment, it calls for a well-regulated militia. And so they're expanding some on that. Here's the thing. If this Muslim versus the rest of the world thing continues to accelerate, if we have some terrorist acts here in the country, which is probably inevitable, you'll see more of this type stuff come up because people's going to have to, they're going to say enough's enough. You're seeing it right now in Europe. You really are. And let's see. It was in. It might have been in Sweden. After Wilder was elected, there was another sort of like senator up there. He wants to tear down all the mosques. He says they have no right to come in our country and build these things. I mean, that's the kind of rhetoric you're starting to hear from some of the government people. So you're starting to see two sides build up here, and it's going to be interesting to see how it unravels. But it's definitely getting everybody's attention. There's no doubt about that. Big thing is probably tonight. You probably learned some tonight on whether the ceasefire expires or not. But like I said, poor Israel. You need to be praying for them. They're really in a hard place because it's almost to the point now. There's almost Israel versus the rest of the world. You've got the United States as the big. See, here's the thing: United States has clout on them because we're resupplying them with munitions, and I'm sure Biden's going to be saying, "Hey, you're going to have to do what we say, or we're going to quit bringing armament over to you." So they're in a hard place right now. So need to pray for them. All right, Mr. Tom, have at it, buddy.
In our study we've been doing on 2 Chronicles 34, and it was the inception of Josiah, we find that about 300 years earlier, Josiah was prophesied. I don't know if you all knew that or not. And I would have to go back to my notes and find that. But he was prophesied about 300 years earlier that he would come to the throne and that he would rule in Judah. He would be the king of Judah. And even after he became king, with all the with everything that he did, purifying not only Judah and tearing down the idols and destroying the Ashtoreth groves and getting rid of the altars of Baal and different ones like that, different things like that. Even going into Israel, Israel had been decimated at this point by Assyria, so they were already carried off. So you had some cities still left in Israel, and he went in and purified those cities as well. So you go in and you see where he is doing this, and they find the book of the law of Moses, and they read it, and he realizes that Judah is sinning just like, and has sinned just like Israel did, and reading the catastrophic events that followed that left to Israel's demise, he ripped his clothes and began doing the changes.
1 King 13:2.
Right. Thank you.
And he was prophesied by name.
Right.
And by the lineage. He was in the house of David. So a very specific prophecy that was fulfilled.
So he comes to the throne. One of the things they have to contend with is he goes in and destroys the altars. He goes in and destroys the altars. One of the reasons he does is so that the people won't be tempted to go and do this again. And one of the reasons they will be tempted to do this because they have it ingrained into them this type of God worship. It didn't matter. You know, the thing to do was to bring your children in, slaughter them on this altar to Astarte or to Molech or to Baal, and think that was okay. Think that it was all right because the law had been hidden for a long time. No one knew until Josiah and the priests found it. So, in my notes today, I was studying this week. Out of all the kings of Israel, there was 33 kings of Israel. They were all evil. They all did wicked in front of God. In God, they were all wicked kings, and there wasn't one of them that was righteous. So out of 33 of them, and I've got a list here if you want the list, but and the places they were even found. There were 9 kings that did right by God, did right by God, and that was David, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joash, Amaziah, Uzziah, Jotham, Hezekiah, and Josiah. Those 9 were the only ones that were righteous. Thank you. And not one of the kings of the northern kingdom were godly. Not one of them. And I think that is catastrophic when you think about it. Because you think of all the things that they led the people into doing. Israel was chosen by God to be a light unto the nations. So the idea was they would shine, they would see their Jehovah God, Yahweh, and want to be like them. Instead, they turned and went the way of all the other gods, the false gods. So it brings us to the valley of the son of Hinnom. I just wrote down some notes today. The valley of Hinnom, also known as Gehinnom or Gehenna, is a historical valley surrounding ancient Jerusalem from the west and southwest that had acquired various theological connotations, including as a place of divine judgment and punishment in Jewish eschatology. That's found in Wikipedia. I just went and looked it up. The valley of Hinnom was a place of evil in the Old Testament, where parents made their children pass through fire to Baal and Molech, and that's found in 1 Kings 11:33. The place is first mentioned as part of the borders between the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, Joshua 15:8. It was the site of the Tophet for where the king sacrificed their children, Jeremiah 7:31 and Jeremiah 19:2-6. I can give you those references later if you like. But when you read about it, Jonathan Cahn says what they did was they would pierce the children and let them bleed out on that altar. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you would do that. How do you deafen yourself to the cries? In one of the stages of abortion that has come along in the United States, one of the things that I thought was one of the most uncompassionate things a person could do was at the last moment, if a mother said, "I want to abort the child," they would simply lay the child on a steel slab on a table and let it die from exposure. I don't know how you do that. A baby crying and no one being able to attend to it. That strikes a note in me. It should strike a note in anyone that's human. Even an animal wouldn't let its baby or something like that suffer like that. The various gods and goddesses that were made up the pantheon of various countries around them. The first was Ashtoreth. Let me open this up here. Ashtoreth, or better known, sometimes known as Astarte, was a Middle Eastern goddess, an East Semite goddess Ishtar. She was a Semitic goddess, mother goddess of Phoenicia, Babylonia, Arabia, and Abyssinia, who was a fertility and deity of love and fertility. She was the chief goddess of the Sidonians. She was Astarte of the Baal and of Baal, and when we're saying Baal, it's Baal. That's how it's pronounced, actually. Judges 10:6. Another god was the god called Chemosh, Chemosh. And Jeremiah 48:7 and 13. And he was the god of the Moabites. The god of the Moabites. The last one that's mentioned here, this is in 1 Kings 11:33, was Milcom. Another name for Milcom was Molech. And he was the first national god of the Ammonites. Leviticus 18:21. Okay. The Valley of Hinnom was a deep, narrow ravine west and south of Jerusalem. At the high places of Baal in the Valley of Hinnom, parents sacrificed their children as a burnt offering to Molech, 2 Kings 23:10. Ahaz and Manasseh, kings of Judah, were both guilty of the awful wickedness. 2 Chronicles 28:3, 33:6. But good King Josiah destroyed the pagan altars to remove this temptation from the people of Judah. The prophet Jeremiah foretold that God would judge this awful abomination of human sacrifice and would cause such destruction that the valley of the son of Hinnom would become known as the Valley of Slaughter, which is found in Jeremiah 7:31 and 32. The place was also called Tophet, Tophet. The Valley of Hinnom was used as a garbage dump for the city of Jerusalem. There were refuse, waste materials, and dead animals were burned here. Fires continually smoldered and smoked from the burning debris that rose day and night. Hinnom thus became the graphic symbol of woe and judgment, and a place of eternal punishment called hell. The Greek name for Hinnom was Gehenna. Any questions? So I wrote down some things in my studies as I begin to look at it and think, well, how did we come to the point of where you have not just abortion, but you have sanctuary cities for abortion? If you want an abortion, just come here. We'll even pay for your trip here and get you here so you can have an abortion. The reason for the increased violence and a sense of value of life. June 25th, 1962, the Supreme Court declared prayer in public school unconstitutional. In 1930 and 1952, justices declined to rule on the constitutionality of requiring Bible reading in public school. Funny part about this, Marcy, you may even be able to remember this too. One time in grade school, we found out that the shortest sentence in the English language was Jesus wept. Isn't that interesting? It was public school. That was the shortest sentence in the English language. Jesus wept.
What was the second one?
Sorry?
What was the second shortest?
I don't know. I just remember that always sticking in my mind. Was thinking that here it was and of course it had to have been probably prior to 1962, because after 1962, it was carte blanche. You know, first it was every state was allowed to choose if they wanted to have prayer in school, and some states did. They mandated it, where you'd have the Lord's Prayer every day. You prayed in school. You said the flag, the honor of the flag, and pledge allegiance to the flag, and different things like that. And we had a certain amount of morality that was instilled. I remember seeing on the walls of the school the Ten Commandments. They were there. It was like, you know, what they, at that point in time in my life, it didn't really mean a lot to me. Even though I did go to church, I went. Now, honestly, VBS was my favorite time to go to school, Vacation Bible School, because we didn't have a lot of money in our house, so it was Kool-Aids and cookies when you go to the VBS. You get Kool-Aid and you get cookies, you know. So everybody recite their little thing and they get a cookie, you know. So you get something, you know. So, but you didn't realize at that point in time, it didn't register. It didn't register with me. Now, as I'm adult and with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, you think, you see the deceleration of our nation, how we have diminished, and how we've gotten away from the moral code. The moral code was instilled in us and installed in us from the Ten Commandments. And it's amazing. 1962, 13 states required prayer and Bible reading in public schools. Days in schools would begin with the Lord's Prayer. Number 2, the word fetus replaced the word, what was it? Baby. Now, during my study today, fetus is a Latin word, originally meaning offspring. The word fetus is commonly used in medical terminology to refer to the developing unborn offspring of a mammal. There's another word, a mammal. The word refers to the preborn state of human or animal in development stages prior to birth. So the word baby was replaced with the word fetus. So why would that be important? Why do you think that they would deliberately choose that terminology?
Because there's no humanism linked to it.
Exactly. Sherry said there's no humanism attached to it. So at that point in time, any mammal is a fetus. Any mammal. So, and we were qualified and classified as mammals. Okay, the next one, another way you do it, is the 3/5 clause. I don't know if you ever heard of that, the 3/5 clause. The 3/5 clause, now, Charlotte, this is something that applies to the Black Americans. The 3/5 compromise agreement between the delegates of the northern and southern states in the U.S. Constitutional Convention in 1787 that 3/5 of the slave population would be counted for determining direct taxation in the House of Representatives. The 3/5 compromise was an agreement made in 1787 that 3/5 of the state's slaves' population would count toward its total population of tax obligations. Only 3 out of 5 slaves were counted when establishing a state's total population. This was used in taxation and representation. Now, I remember this coming up, was the 3/5 rule eventually got distorted to a point that a black person was only 3/5 of a human. You remember that? I do. I remember that statement, the black person is only 3/5 of a human. Now, what in Einstein's shadowed as a person. How does a person become 3/5 of a human? But that's how it is. It started out as a taxation program. So they only counted 3 out of 5, which diminished 2 of them. So you had 5 out of 5 whites being counted, but you only had 3 out of 5 blacks being counted. So there was a "you're not as good as we are," type of mentality. I was reading that, made my blood boil. Number 4, Margaret Sanger. Who hasn't heard of her? She was actually the one that mentored a lot of the theology ideology she had, was some of that which Adolf Hitler carried. Same idea. American birth control activist, educator, and nurse in 1879 to 1966, Sanger popularized the term birth control, opened the first birth control clinic in the U.S., and established organizations that evolved into Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Her first birth control was staffed by all female doctors, and as well as a clinic in Harlem. At World War I, Sanger increasingly posited a societal need to limit births by those least able to afford children. The affluent and educated already limited their childbearing, while poor uneducated lacked access to contraception information about birth control. Here she found an area of overlap into eugenicists. If anybody don't know what eugenics is, it's where you call out people. People are called out. I don't mean call. They're kind of separated. She believed that they both sought to assist the race toward the elimination of unfit. Classes of people in society to be eliminated were poor, derelict, blacks, and gypsies. There's probably more to that, but I didn't spend a lot more time reading that. So you look at, now you have a nation that is, I like that term, that statistic you gave a while ago about all the babies being born since Roe v. Wade was reversed. But you find these states that are so adamant, West Coast, East Coast, that you find so adamant about making sure that people have access to abortions. And a few weeks ago, I made a comment. I said, what if people knew the Bible well enough to know how to destroy a country? What if they knew what needed to be done to destroy a nation? What if they willed it? What if they said, "Wait, let's create this abortion so that we can really rile God up"? Because that's what Israel did. That's what they did. They did things just to spite God, just to get Him mad.
And that's kind of what Khan's putting together in this next CD.
You want to
or
go ahead?
DVD, whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
It starts tying in that how we're on the same path of destruction as Israel was.
I've come to the end of my notes on here. I got more, but I'd be interested to hear what he has to say.
Okay.